Welcome back to 4FS Gaming. Now I really love jumping into a starfighter in a match of Galactic Assault and raining down death from above. But just how helpful is that kind of air support? Does it actually serve a purpose within the team, or is it merely a selfish way to rack up those battle points? When executed properly, a good pilot on a Galactic Assault map can more than pull their weight when it comes to winning the game. In this video, we will go over the different uses of starfighters in this game mode, and dive into some tactics and tips to help you dominate the skies in Galactic Assault. Now for those of you wondering about the second part of our aerial trooper guide, expected sometime around Monday. So here we go. As I see it, there are 4 different reasons to play a starfighter in Galactic Assault, and we're going to start off tackling the most important, but probably the least talked about, which is actually how you play the objective. Yes, that's right, you can indeed play the objective while flying far above it. We're going to have a look at a few examples. Say you are playing Escort the Walker or the MTT tank. Now your job is to prevent the enemy from firing off those ion launchers, right? Well, you're actually in a very good place to do this while in the air, mainly because when an enemy carries or starts firing those cannons, they have a massive red crosshair placed above their heads. In a starfighter, you can hone in on that waypoint and launch a barrage of laser fire and cancel that shot. This is usually a lot easier to do from the air than from the ground, where you will actually have to move across the map and find the target. An aircraft can do it in mere moments. The obvious problem here is if the enemy is taking the shot from inside a building, then you can't do a thing unless you really take a shallow angle dive. On the other end of the stick, when you are defending against the oncoming walkers or the MTTs, you have even more power to play the objective from the air. This is because starships, in particular bombers, have absolutely enormous damage potential, and their missiles are extremely powerful. So when your team on the ground gets off that ion shot, you can line up a strafing run and deal massive damage, and also earn massive amounts of score. To really maximize that damage, you need to be constantly aware of the ion cannon icons around your heads-up display, and when you see one preparing to fire, make sure you are setting off for a strafing run. Of course, all of this does rely on your team being competent enough to actually get those ion shots off, without which you will not be able to contribute nearly as much, and you can't really help with that part of the strategy while you're flying in a starfighter. But what about the other objectives, such as a capture point, sabotage, or slice? Surely you can't help very much as a flyboy in these circumstances. Well, although I often see people flying around not doing much to help at all, if you are aware of the map dynamics, you can still stem the flow of enemy troops moving toward the objective. The idea here is to identify the routes that most enemy forces take toward the objective, whatever that is, and then identify the most narrow parts of those routes. This could be the stairs up the sides of the turbo tanks on Kashyyyk, or the small ramp up to the first open capture point on Jakku. And then you set up strafing run after strafing run on these choke points, and you can easily pick up 2 or even 3 kills per run. This not only reduces the amount of enemies that your team on the ground has to deal with, but it may also force the enemy team to consider other, less dangerous directions of attack to the objective, which are often slower and give them another disadvantage. The closer you get to overtime, the more potential this strategy has, as the more desperate and less careful the enemy team becomes. So that is how you can play the objective from the air, but there are many other ways of playing air support that can give you an advantage. The second purpose, in my opinion, is to use that air support to counter particularly obnoxious enemy units. I'm thinking mainly of AATs, ATSDs, and the occasional ATRT. These can certainly be a pain to deal with on the ground unless a few teammates help you out with some ion weaponry. However, from the air, especially with a bomber, it becomes child's play to take down most of these vehicles. The bomber missiles pretty much instantly destroy them, while fighters and interceptors can take them out in a few strafing runs. By taking to the air and punishing enemy vehicles as soon as they spawn, you can save your team on the ground a whole lot of hurt. But it's not just tanks that aircraft can counter. An astute pilot can also decimate enemy heroes if they get caught out in the open. If you spot a hero on the ground, line up a run and you can protect your team from a nightmare by taking out that Palpatine before he even gets properly into the fight. Let's move on to the third purpose of playing air support, and this is a bit more selfish, but can come back around and help the team in the later part of the game. You may have noticed that a good pilot can gain an enormous amount of battle points from their actions, such as damaging other fighters, shooting objectives on the ground, killing vehicles, or just strafing infantry. These points can either be used to transition into an early game hero to make an impact before the enemy gets heroes to counter you, or saved throughout an entire match playing air support in order to allow you to chain heroes and elite reinforcements in the final phase, which often occurs indoors. Either way, the point earning potential of staying in the air is a little unbalanced at the moment, and if you stay alive, you will almost always make more points than playing a trooper on the ground. You just have to make sure that you do actually stay alive, because you have to make back your initial investment of battle points to jump into that starship to begin with. Alrighty then, let's move on to the final reason to play air support, and this is probably the most important reason, and that is to completely deny the opposing team any of the advantages listed above by shooting all of their ships out of the sky. This is really your first priority while playing in the air, and that is to kill any enemy ships operated by actual players. You can ignore the AI, they are pretty ineffectual and don't represent much of a threat, and they also don't net you many points anymore. But the enemy player fighters can very quickly wipe you out if you don't focus them down straight away. In order to play the objective from the air, or counter a specific ground unit, you must first achieve control of the airspace. If the airspace is dominated by the enemy, then you will not survive long enough to help anyone at all. When you do manage to clear out the enemy aircraft, then you always have to be aware of those red arrows on your HUD that show when another enemy ship has spawned, and you should move to kill it instantly. Getting caught up in a lengthy dogfight where you spin in circles essentially takes you out of the fight, as you cannot help win the ground battle or earn points while spinning endlessly. For this reason, when you're in the air with a wingman that you're communicating with, it can really enhance this type of strategy. So what ship should you choose when it comes to playing air support? Well, at the end of the day, you're going to pick what you like playing as. But that being said, there is definitely some advantage to choosing a specific ship. Bombers are excellent at hitting ground targets, because they can slow down a lot to lengthen their strafing runs before they have to pull up. They can also fire the longest without overheating, and their missiles deal by far the most damage. Interceptors are the best at dogfights, and as such are the ship of choice for gaining and then keeping aerial superiority. The interceptor's job is to kill any player ship that spawns moments after it flies in, and then worry about the ground as a secondary concern. The fighter is probably my favourite when playing solo, because it can fulfill both of these roles. It is still able to make its presence known when firing at good ground targets, but it can also hold its own in a dogfight with any other ship class. When I don't have a dedicated wingman, this is a good choice to engage with all situations. While in the air, your main threat will be other ships, but you do have to take some note of things shooting you from the ground. Your main issue will be tanks, such as the AAT, which can kill any ship in only a couple of hits. However, their shots are quite slow, and so if you're moving around in the air, it is almost impossible to hit you. However, if you are flying straight towards an AAT or an ATST and it is looking at you, it really doesn't take much at all for you to get shot out of the sky. Another thing to look out for are snipers that are firing that heavy NT rifle at you. This has a distinctive green blaster bolt, and it's able to deal an enormous amount of damage if they can land consistent shots. If you see this is happening, you need to hone in on the source of those shots and turn that specialist into laser dust. In conclusion, flying air support in Galactic Assault can be very rewarding, and it's certainly fun. However, you do need to be sure that you are actually helping your team. Shooting AI ships for the entire match is not helpful, but there are certainly ways to make a massive difference on the battlefield if you so choose. So what's the coolest thing that you've ever managed to pull off while flying over the battlefronts of Star Wars? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. This is Ascendance from 4FS Gaming.